Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the first session of the Employee Recognition Drives Engagement webinar series, presented by Human Resources Today and sponsored by Achievers. I'm Nava, the site manager of HRT, and I'm excited to bring you this session with hard-earned insight about leadership development. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Jazmine today in what will likely prove to be an interesting and amusing conversation. And we'll also be recording this session in case you have to leave at any point. And if you're interested in more content like this, please check out the full series. Thank you again for joining us for this SHRM and HRCI approved webinar. All attendees who stay for the full webinar will receive an email with the activity ID after. But before we go any further, I want to thank Achievers for sponsoring this series and helping us to make it happen. Achievers Employee Voice and Recognition Solutions brings your organization's values and strategy to life. They can activate employee participation and fuel a culture of performance to experience data-driven business results. So thanks again, Achievers. On that note, please feel free to ask questions during today's session. You can do so by submitting them into the questions panel on the right side of your screen. We'll try to answer as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. My lovely colleague Joe will be fielding all your questions today. He'll be happy to answer any you might have. So pull up the panel and say hello to let him know that you're listening. Also, if you have any audio issues during today's presentation, you may choose to dial in by phone. You can do so by selecting the More button in the upper right portion of your screen and then select the Switch to Phone option. So today the reason we're all here is I'm talking to Jazmine Wilkes, the Human Resources Generalist at SEA Wire and Cable Incorporated. She holds both a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in HR Management. She's also the creator of the HRJazzy.Blog, which we're going to be sending out the link in the chat, and an avid contributor to numerous blogs and HR business conferences. She's also been named as one of the top influencing HR professionals by Namely HR and Recruiting Blog's Women Leaders You Should Know. And so on that note, today she's going to be speaking to us about how to develop your employees into leaders. But before she begins, I just wanted to share that a fun fact about Jazmine is that she loves baking and learning how to use icing for cakes. But now I'll hand it over to you. So take it away, Jazmine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to first say thank you to Human Resources Today for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you about one of my favorite topics, millennials. So being that tomorrow happens to be Employee Appreciation Day on March 6th, I hope that you can leave this webinar with more ways to encourage your up-and-coming leaders and employees, and even the managers and executive team at your workplace, no matter if they are a millennial or not. Before we get too far in the webinar, I have our first two questions about Employee Appreciation Day to get us started. So you should see the poll coming up. And the first question is, did you know that March 6th is Employee Appreciation Day?
All right, everyone is very quick to vote, so I'm just going to give a few more seconds here, but the results may surprise you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it up and share the results. Are you seeing them, Jazmine, that 35% said yes and 65% said no?
No, I don't see them, but oh, that's fine. 35% and 65. Okay, cool.
All right, well, I will.
All right, and we have the next poll. Do you currently have anything planned for Employee Appreciation Day?
Well, based on the results for the last one, this should be interesting to see where everyone's going to be voting. But I will read out the results to you to make sure that you know what's happening.
Okay.
All right, again, yeah, everyone is very quick to vote. So I'm going to go ahead and close up the poll and share the results to our audience. So it looks like 19% said yes, 56% said no, and 25% said no, but they will now.
Okay, well, that's good. We want some people to say now that they will. And then actually, so for Employee Appreciation Day, it actually falls on the first Friday in March. So this year it just happens to be March 6th, but the first Friday of March, you all mark your calendars so you can be ready for Employee Appreciation Day next year. So in this webinar, I'm going to give you my take on a few things on what employers can do to ensure that they are treating employees not as a generational standard, but as a human being. That's what we are. And we're going to be discussing how retaining employees start with their personal motivations, why you shouldn't treat millennials different from other employees in the workforce, getting rid of the millennial misconception in the workplace, and how placing potential leaders in a generational box limits your company, and not only your company, but also that actual employee. Well, my first piece of advice I have to share is to ensure that you know the exact generation you're referring to. As you can see, I still see a lot of think pieces and articles on how millennials are just now entering the workforce. And that is so far from the truth. There might be people who have been fortunate enough to not be, not have to work for a certain number of years before they entered the workforce. But to think that millennials are the generation that is now currently coming into your workforce, taking over and telling everyone to buy beanbag chairs and pool tables is wrong. I can tell you that I had a Nokia phone, and I even know what a rotary phone is and what VHS happens to be. So that is my first piece of advice, is to make sure you understand the generations, even though sometimes I have seen where the data fluctuates on the years. And that's actually going to load us into our next poll, which is, which generation are you?
Yeah, Jasmine, on this question, I've definitely even struggled to understand exactly where, millennials end and Gen Z starts. And I feel like it's even though you have it in this as clear-cut years, sometimes it's never that way, which can make it
It's
difficult
not,
for people.
yeah, it definitely is. I've seen it go up to 1996,
Oh, wow.
go down to 1992. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's as long as you kind of know where the range is, then you're good. All right, well, it looks like everyone has voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll for that. And so for baby boomers, we have 21%, Gen X, we have 46%, and then millennials, we have 31%, and Gen Z, bringing it up there, and 2%.
All right. And then the final poll for this webinar today is, have you ever been judged based on your age in the workforce?
All right, this looks like it has a clear winner, and again, everyone is putting in their votes so quickly, which I really appreciate. So I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds here, and I'm going to close it out. All right, so it looks like 62% said yes, they have been judged, 21% said no, and 17% said that they're not sure.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you all for your answers. Based on the age ranges in the first poll that you saw, the oldest millennial is 40 this year, while the youngest is 26. And we are not all motivated by the same thing. No matter if we're talking about a workplace standard or not, if you follow me personally on Instagram, you might have noticed that recently I've started a journey of paying off student loan debt. And it is a huge journey with a number of years to go. But for that purpose alone, right now, one of my motivators happens to be money. But money doesn't motivate everyone, and especially not every millennial. Millennial employees are probably not the only generation in your workforce. So it is important that you understand what you are willing to do to ensure there are multiple options available to help everyone that you've hired into your organization. And at the end of the day, Millennials are people who have seen our parents, our caregivers, teachers make a lot of sacrifices to keep food on the table and a roof over our head. And while I believe we are appreciative of those things, we don't want to go through the same struggles. Being able to pay off my student loan is very important to me. And since I've gone to school to learn and position myself in a way to help your organization, I believe that I have the right to be paid fairly, and that doesn't seem too hard. So you have to remember that everyone isn't motivated by money, and employers can't be scared of the employees advancing our education or professional network. Um, so professional development is another major motivator for deciding on a company, especially for where I live. A lot of the companies are doing the same type of work. So that's one way for employers to get ahead of the game. And just as a quick note, every millennial does not like avocado toast, myself included. So you want to make sure that you're not just providing your employees with a paycheck. Otherwise, they'll become a Michael Scott and start holding even more pointless meetings in your workplace than you might already have. And just as another quick throw out here, I am a lover of memes. If you ever seen my blog post or my Twitter, you will know that. So you'll see a few in this webinar today. So for professional development, I've been blessed to have organizations that in one way or another supported my growth. And I wouldn't be able to do the things like this webinar if I wasn't constantly being exposed to different areas in the workforce. As an employer, if you want the best people representing your company and with their knowledge and skill of a field, then you can't be afraid of allowing them to go out and learn more. Once again, you're not only limiting your employee, but you're also limiting your company by doing that. Professional development can definitely be a win-win for both the employee and the employer if you're not afraid of allowing that employee to grow. Organizations are now in a potential uproar of trying to figure out how they will allow employees to be remote workers for 2 weeks if the coronavirus gets worse. But if you're being honest with yourself, how many of your organizations could actually be remote right now, but the executive team or someone else doesn't want to relinquish that type of control of having people come into their building to do the exact same job that they could do from their couch? So you have to be mindful of that when you want your employee to grow and be their best selves. You have to realize that sometimes that's going to take some pull and some take from you, the employer. How can you grow how can your employee grow in their role and in your company overall? And just because they can doesn't mean they want to, which is huge. So growth within a role can be another major way to motivate your employee, just like money, just like a flexible hours or remote work. The important thing is that you know that this is something they want to do and not something that they are forced to do. No one can be a great leader if management is scared of their potential, but at the same time, the employee has to know that this is something that they want to go into. And in my opinion, this happens to be one of the major issues within leadership is that we might need a succession plan in place, but that doesn't mean we need to force employees who we think would be good in the role to go after it. Encourage them, sure. But if you have someone that is maybe a receptionist for you going to school to be an accounting major, and then you try to force them into a role that has nothing to do with accounting, they're not necessarily going to succeed. And as an employer, you can't be upset with that because that is not the field that motivates them to be who they want to be. So leadership should not be defined by age. And the faster we understand this, the faster we can stop placing people, not only employees, and a generational standard that isn't true. The most basic definition of the word leadership is the action of leading a group of people or an organization. And that's according to our friend Google. Um, Nothing in the definition mentions someone's age, race, gender, sexual orientation. It's simply the ability to do one's job. So as employers, we should be more focused on helping those who are doing great things for the organization or preparing our workforce for things like a virus breakout, an active shooter incident, a fire, or being able to communicate with remote workers in the same way that we communicate with those who are in the same building as we are. We shouldn't be trying to figure out who will be the best leader based on if they happen to like avocado toast or not. Because if that's what my organization went by, I'd definitely never be a leader in it. So leaders become great not because of their power, but because of their ability to empower others. And that's what you need to be looking for. We need to stop placing limitations on people based on the own fears that the organization or a president or a CEO or owner might have on themselves and pushing that on to our employees. So to me, being a leader means understanding when you need to put your employees ahead of maybe your production. It means not judging others for taking the time they need to be their very best self. We are different in ways, in that way that I believe we've been more vocal about the way we work as millennials. And just because people have always maybe worked 5 days in a row, it doesn't mean that it's the standard that we should keep for every job in your workforce. And we're deemed as difficult because we decide to call out situations in which we believe the employer might be wrong. And in my opinion, you should want someone who, as a leader, will be willing to speak their mind as long as they're doing it in a respectful way and with knowledge. So to build a great team requires a leader who has the ability to inspire their team to believe anything is possible. As a leader, you must take care of your people because it often reflects on the service they give to their customers. And these quotes that you all are seeing, you can find them on on Leadership First page on LinkedIn. I think it's a great resource for you all to see and for anyone who is interested in leadership. So it's time that we stop blaming millennials for being able to speak out and for making sure we're taking care of ourselves mentally and physically instead of keeping your company running or digging ourselves in a grave. Being a great leader also means that you take time to ensure you're healthy as possible for yourself first. And millennials are not the only people in the workforce that needs to acknowledge the power of self-care or being able to spend time with a parent or a family or their kids, or maybe just sitting on the couch with your favorite beverage and a book. Many organizations are screaming about, we have that work-life balance that employees are looking for and able to have in their company, but they don't follow that up with action. And they are talking about the benefit, but that's not enough for employees to really feel like that they can able to come in maybe 2 hours late because of a therapy appointment, or maybe they need to get off 3 hours early to go spend time and watch their kid play football or basketball or anything. So that is my soapbox for self-care, and just a reminder for everyone here, I hope that you do something for yourself today as a form of self-care. So to become a great leader, we need people who are going to be willing to help us get to the next step. So far, I've talked about the importance of motivation for employees, and I hope I've shown why it's important to make sure you're not placing employees in generational box. But communication also goes a very long way and would possibly help many of the issues that anyone feels that they might be having with a millennial in the workforce, or the idea of what they believe a millennial to be in the workforce. And we might have been born into a year that made us millennials, but that isn't how we should be defined in life, and especially not in the workplace. We shouldn't be treated differently because we speak out about the same issues another generation may be facing. Some of us want to explore the world and not only be subjected to the same people every day. And for a sidebar, as someone who loves and watches a lot of true crime, I've learned that job hopping is not only a millennial thing, but a lot of, in particular for what I watch, men in the 70s and 80s up and moved their families in the middle of the night, found a new job, but at least as millennials, we're willing to give you notice on most occasions that we're about to leave. You can pretty much normally figure it out, or we'll at least tell you that, hey, this is our 2 weeks. But it's very important that you communicate with us about what you want us to do and the steps that it will take for us to become the leaders that you want to see. I've never met someone who enjoys job hopping for fun. And I'm not saying that, it's not possible. It's just that I've never met them. And in 2019, I personally had 3 different jobs. And my biggest concern wasn't what I would be bringing to the workplace, but it was, how would this look on my resume if this job didn't work out and I had to find yet another job in the same year. So leadership should be based on performance and ability, and not on a standard that millennials don't need money because we don't want to buy homes or diamonds. Our outside life does influence our work life, but millennials shouldn't be written off as possible leaders because our beliefs don't necessarily match those of the owners or current organization leadership. In order to continue growing your company, it's important for some things to change. And hiring a millennial in as a part of the leadership team takes nothing away from those who have been there in the past. So in November of 2018, I was on Secure the Seat podcast, which is hosted by Minda Hart. And we had a conversation surrounding millennials in the workforce. And one thing that I made clear was that bringing new people into the organization doesn't shrink the knowledge that has been there for years. I think it's very important, excuse me, to come into an organization and observe what is happening, who is talking to who, and why decisions are being made. I encourage you to go out and listen to that episode to understand from a millennial perspective a few points that I didn't make in this slide, in this webinar. So the topic of working with a millennial is very heavy, at least in the area in which I live. The other day, I saw a speaker who talks about millennials put up a picture of a pacifier when talking about millennials. And it kind of blew my mind as how far we've gone to bring down people inside of our organization. With the oldest millennial being 40, we are leaders and we have been leaders for years now. We shouldn't be placing limitations on anyone, and especially not because of the year that they happen to be born. Is it true that millennials have things in common? Yes, there is no doubt that we do. But those things don't define who we are as individuals, or the position that we want to hold with the company, or the ability to do the very best at our job. generational boxes limits your company's ability to grow to their best potential, and millennials should not be treated differently from those who might be a tad older or younger coming into the workforce every day to do a job that helps the company, helps to keep the company running. Is it possible that you could get other people to come in and do the job that you feel like a millennial is maybe complaining about? Then sure. But then you're blaming us for your turnover when in reality, the communication that we gave you surrounding why we weren't happy or what is not being taken seriously in the workforce in our eyes, we, because in the eyes of the organization, we have nothing to complain about. When millennials should not be treated differently when we're trying to make a difference for not only ourselves, but for those all around us. For me, for example, one of the things is that the older generations are the only generations that are looking into healthcare as far as, making sure their parents are taken care of. And that's not true. As a millennial who, hasn't reached 30 yet, that's one of my concerns. So you should encourage your employees to go after what they want. And sometimes that happens to be a position in your company. And sometimes it just might be somewhere else, but appreciate them for what they've given. And I hope in this webinar you can realize that yes, millennials can be and have been leaders of an organization, that we shouldn't place anyone in a generational box, and believe that it's the only way that they're defined as a person just by the year that they happen to be born in. So as we're finishing up, so treat everyone as the human they are and not a generational standard. That is extremely big, especially not even for millennials, but for the generation that is coming into your workforce. We don't want you to be complaining about the things that the millennials have done in the past that you feel, and then putting those on Generation Z coming as they do come into the workforce. And we want you to appreciate the people who keep your company running, and that's not just the customers. In order to have happy customers, you have to have happy employees, because they're the ones that are putting themselves on the front line dealing with your customers every day. And to be a great leader, we have to see leadership from somewhere. So you might be upset at, the types of people that, well, my bad, we might be upset at millennials for the things that we're doing, but we had to learn that lesson from somewhere. And just because we want to change what that lesson might look like for us and what it might be like for us, doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. Sometimes we need to go about doing it in a different way, and making sure that we're able to communicate the issues that we're having and where we want to go in our leadership, then yes. But leadership should not be defined by age, and it shouldn't be based on just because this person is in this generation, they can't do A, B, C, or D. We've done a lot of great things and led a lot of great causes that aren't in the workforce, and those things should transfer into the workforce. We have kids that are running the Flint, Michigan water crisis. We have kids that are talking about climate change. And they're not millennials, but the work that they've done now is definitely going to transfer into the workforce for them to become a great leader. And that's why you should appreciate everyone and what they can bring to your workforce. Communicate with your employees and find out what motivates them personally and professionally, because that is how you're going to get them to continue to come back. that is how you're going to get them to be happy when they walk in your door, any day of the week. And I tweeted out something, recently that says, I don't hate my job and I don't hate Mondays necessarily, but I hate getting out of my bed before 10 a.m. on Monday. So, those type of things might be small, but they can lead you to figuring out, okay, do we really need someone in this role here at this certain hour? And that's what communication opened the door for you to understand who millennials or who that person is in your workforce and what you're doing as a company to continue bringing them back into the workplace. And don't place people in a generational box based on your personal fears. So for many things, we might say, oh, that person could never do this, or that person could never be the CEO of, this company, when in fact it's something that you felt that you couldn't achieve. And now you're placing that blame on or you're placing that fear onto someone else and limiting the growth that they have within themselves. You have to allow employees to be the very best that they can be. And like I said earlier, sometimes that means that they're going to leave your organization, but that doesn't mean that you should stop their growth. You should be happy that they were able to learn what they could from you and then possibly go on to other ventures in life. Being upset at millennials instead of talking to us. A lot of people say, I have a millennial boss and I don't know how to work with that millennial boss. And the question is, does the fact that they're a millennial even matter at all? Or do you just simply have a problem with that person, and maybe the way you all communicate, or maybe the way you learn or need training done, and they're not able to do that, or they're not doing that for you currently? That would just involve having a conversation with someone that has nothing to do based on their age of, when they were born and what generation they fall into. And that's how you allow your employees to be who they want to be for themselves and for the company. So since tomorrow is Employee Appreciation Day, here are a few tips on what you can do. But remember that you should not just be showing your employees appreciation on a national holiday. We all deserve to be shown appreciation in more ways than receiving a paycheck. And it can be something as simple as a written note, yes, and money by a bonus or raise. Sometimes a pizza party is good, but sometimes you'd be surprised at how many people just want you to actually listen to their concerns about becoming a leader. What does that entail? What does that look like for this company? How are you going to help me get to that leadership standard that you're looking for? What do I need to do personally? And then what can you as an organization do for me to help us get and reach this goal of me becoming the next leader? That also means that we're going to need to follow up with answers. We can't just be telling people, oh, you should be this, and not being able to give them examples of what this is and how to get to this. You can also show them appreciation by providing company swag that you might have throughout the office, providing them with a free lunch, half day, providing them with training that is, that goes with either what they are currently doing at this moment in their role, or what goes with what you plan for them to be. And you can also give them a social media shout out if that is what they want. That also gives you as a company brand recognition, because people understand that, hey, this type of company, when they're looking for jobs, you have to realize that yes, millennials and Gen Z are very, very well versed in social media and technology. And so when I'm looking for a job, I'm looking to see what is this company doing social media wise, or what is this company doing to show appreciation to their employees on, a daily or monthly basis, not just something that is every few months they're sprinkling something in that's just saying, oh, hey, this person was employee of the month 3 months ago. That's not showing your employee that you are paying attention to what they're doing, or really care at all about what they're doing. And if you want your employee to become a great leader, then you have to set the standard of what that looks like. I know here in our local area, we have this recognition with our local Chamber of Commerce that is called movers and shakers. And so when a employee is, promoted to another role within your organization, if you submit it to the chamber, then they'll put it out. And those are just small things that you can do to show your employee that you appreciate them and what they're doing. And you don't, once again, you don't want to wait until a national holiday, until it's a national holiday, to do it. So being a leader is about being the best that you can be. It's about showing that you can do the job, that you're willing to do the job, and that has nothing to do with the year that you happen to be born into. And again, the most basic definition of the word leadership is the action of leading a group of people or an organization. And if someone can do that at the age of, 23, then great. You might have to have some communication with that person if you are not used to necessarily having someone that is your boss that you are older than, but that shouldn't limit what that person can do as a leader of that company. And so that is the webinar for today. And we're going to take some questions.
All right, well, first off, Jazmine, I just want to say thank you so much for an amazing presentation. I was learning so much here, and our audience was very engaged, giving their own comments and also just saying what great points you had. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I understand if you need to run, but I just want to tell everyone to check out the next episode in the series, which is about how to create a thriving culture. And also, we're going to be sending out a feedback survey when you log off. So please help us make our webinars better and tell us what you thought of today. And we also just got a couple comments in saying how excellent this session was. So again, great job, Jazmine.
Thank you.
All right, so now let's dive into Q&A. The first question we have was actually emailed to us before the session. That's how excited people were for this. So Kim is wondering, she says that she's a manufacturer with a very limited budget. I know you just gave a few ideas for employee appreciation, and what simple things you can do, but do you have any ideas on how to recognize people in a meaningful way with little or no budget?
Yeah, so it's not always about, buying the expensive swag that, your company might have, or um, necessarily doing lunch for everyone at one time. Sometimes it's about maybe grouping people off and doing smaller lunches, or you would be surprised at how many times someone just wants to be acknowledged that you see what they're doing, and by giving them a word of encouragement when you're we have a warehouse where I work, and so about walking through the warehouse and showing people that, hey, I'm here. If there's something that I need to do for you, if there's something that, you want me to listen to an idea that you have, for the organization, or it's as simple as, hey, you did a great job today. I'm going to let you go an hour early. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything that's huge, a written note that says you did a great job, with something that they can keep, something that they can post up on, if they have cubicles or whatever they might have, somewhere that you can, like a big board, I can't think of the word, like a cork board, where you acknowledge the employee and what they've done. Employee of the month is one of the things that I used to see in the past a lot. So you don't necessarily have to spend money on it, but you do need to acknowledge that you realize that they are doing a great job.
That's a great point, Jazmine, and I really like what you said about, just acknowledging and then just being present. Like if you are just walking around and, just having a quick chat with them, checking in and letting them know that like they are on the right track and everything they're doing is great. So I really like that point. And our next question is from Kimberly. And so on the note that you brought up about, communicating with employees on what motivates them personally, Kimberly wants to know what are some ways we can get to like really know the interest of the person, because each person is so different and they have different interests and different needs. So how can you kind of connect with each individual?
It's hard, and sometimes the people that you have, you don't think would be interested in certain things, they are. But honestly, I know it's, very basic, but it's really about communicating. Some people are, very shy. It might take them, it might take you a few conversations with that person to understand what they're looking for, or what, brings them joy, what's something that they like to do outside of work, that lets them ease their mind. One thing is, I've done in the past is, so we have a newsletter for our company, and I've done this with previous newsletters in the past, where we pick a employee, whether they've done something good or whether it's a new employee, and we want to know and learn more about them. And we ask them questions. What do you like to do, and how do you decompress after a long day? What would your favorite day outside of work be? And then sometimes it is going on company outings, like if you go to, you know, Top Golf or Dave and Buster's, or a game, and saying, hey, how did you all like this? You could always pull out a survey and ask employees what they're looking for, as far as benefits, or what they're looking for as far as extra activities for work. But sometimes it's really just having that open communication and realizing that I understand people are busy, but you have to take time to sit down and talk with people and ask what they're looking for, what they, like I said, what brings them joy and what they're happy about, that doesn't necessarily lead to work.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I know that some of the questions you were saying, people can, see those as icebreakers and tend to shy away from them, but sometimes those are needed in order to really get to know your employees.
Yeah, I really hate icebreakers. As someone who, doesn't necessarily, I like getting to know people, but it's harder for me to get to know people. So I understand that drawback of not wanting to have an icebreaker, but I
Yeah.
also understand the importance of it, because you never know what someone might just be very great at unless you ask
Right.
them.
Yeah. There's definitely pros and cons to it, but I'm on the same page with you. I tend to not want to do icebreakers if I can. All right, so the next question is from Lisa, and she's asking, what recommendations do you have for millennials to gain respect in the workplace?
I want to say that you doing your job and doing it well, is enough for you to gain the respect. Sometimes, unfortunately, based on people saying what they do say about millennials, you might have to, work harder and show, um, what you're doing even more. You might have to go above and beyond, unfortunately. But you doing your job and doing it well should be enough for you to gain the respect in the workforce. No one should down you or give you little meaningless tasks to say, hey, let's see if we can get this person to get this done. Like, do your job and do it well. And hopefully, if it's an organization that is really good, then they will see your value and what you bring to that organization.
All right, I think that was a great point. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, you really just hope that if you're doing your job well, that's all you should need to gain respect. And so our next question is from Eric, and he's wondering what type of analytics do you have that back up that, and I believe, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but that back up that employee appreciation is best for the organization. So do you have analytics on how this creates a better retention rate, less turnover, things like that?
I personally don't. I've gone off of organization um, that I've worked for in the past, off of what we've seen, and just seeing the what comes from it once we, have the communication. But I know that there are plenty of ways for you to go out there and get that data. I just don't have it. I'm going off of, what I've done in the past and how I can tell that, our employees are more engaged and when we do certain things versus if we buy them a t-shirt and they're asking for better benefits, that's not going to get them engaged or make them happy that we decided to buy them a t-shirt. And so those are just what I'm going off of. It's my experiences.
Right. Okay. Perfect.
But it's very possible. Google is, our friend. So it's very possible to get that data. Um, but yeah.
Right. And tomorrow is Employee Appreciation Day, so you can just have your own kind of audit, seeing how well that makes your employees more engaged.
Yeah.
So our next question is going back to the leadership side of things. So you brought up the point that leadership isn't defined by age. So Erin is wondering, how can you assess if employees are ready for leadership? Or, like you said, there was a 23-year-old, and how do you know that, like, if they're interested in leadership, if they are that young?
Well, I think that goes back to also the work that they do. I think it goes back to you can give employees, different tasks and see how they handle those tasks. For me, I was an assistant manager at 22, 23, having to open a store, close a store, having to deal with if someone was, potentially trying to rob our location. Like you have to realize that everyone isn't meant for leadership by any means, but if someone is putting in the work to show you, or if you feel like someone might be there might be potential in someone, then have a conversation and see if that's where they want to go. If they don't know that, yes, they want to be a leader, it's still fine for you to give them, little tasks to do that could promote them into leadership, or um, have them explore different things like a webinar, or if there's like a local group that does, leadership training, have them do those smaller things to see if it's something that they're interested in right now. And if it is or if it isn't, they'll appreciate you for being able to, put them in a networking space that they might have not even known about previously.
Okay, great. We actually had a follow-up to that question. You talked about, how providing them with little tasks to see if they're ready. And so Visha is wondering, what training would you suggest for a future leader?
I think to be a leader, you have to know how to deal with people, primarily, because you can know all of the data, in the world. You can know how to do your job extremely well, but if you don't know how to communicate with those who you are possibly leading, then that's going to cause a big issue within the organization. And so training for communication with people and understanding customers and employees is something. And also from experience of my organization, we have leadership members who are attending a thing called Vistage, that is leadership training. And that's been very helpful for them. So I would say look into things like that. It just really depends on what type of leader your organization is going to want, that you're going to want to seek out and say, hey, is this organization going to be something that they can learn how to become a better leader, and also not only for themselves but also for my organization. So check out Vistage, check out other leadership trainings that you might have.
Okay, awesome. So it really does vary based on your company and like how it is structured, but it's good to know that it really is about people management, and that's kind of the core of being a leader. So being able to do that, then you kind of just have to make sure you know the skills of the job itself, but that's a very important part of it.
Yeah, because you wouldn't necessarily put someone who that you're feeling could be the future CEO of your company through the same leadership training that you're giving someone who's going to be, maybe the sales leader. So you have to understand how far in leadership training a person should go and what else that's going to entail.
Right, and that's actually the perfect segue into our next question. So Reginald is wondering, what is the best approach in interacting in a multi-generational environment to help grow these leaders?
Mm, I have never necessarily had an issue with that. Um, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I feel like someone is looking necessarily down on me based on the fact that I'm a millennial or my age. So I might not, I probably don't have the best answer for you with that. But it's really about, at some point in time you're going to have a real conversation. Like if it's really an issue, you're going to have a real conversation with that person regarding what's causing that issue. And again, does it really lead to a generational issue, or is it that you all have something else that's completely different and now you have to work it out, and they're just throwing the fact that throwing the generational fact on top of it. But I probably wouldn't be the best person to answer that question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We still appreciate your answer on that, and you've given us a ton of other insights. So our next question is shifting gears a little bit, but Brittany is wondering, what do you do when you have a very high performing employee, but you can tell that they're not very engaged with the work? What kind of recognition or appreciation can you show them to make them feel more valued?
Well, for that, if they're high performing in their job but not engaged, then you're going to have to find out what's going to engage them. What is going to be that determining factor that makes them, some days I'm in HR. Some days I'm doing the same thing, and that can get tedious for some people. Whereas in some days I'm doing, five different, types of employee engagement, or employee relations, or training and development. And so for me, multitasking is something that helps me get going. But that's me. You're going to have a conversation and find out um, what will motivate that employee. Is it something simple that they're missing? Is it something going on at home that, they're no longer being as engaged as they were previously in the past? Or um, sometimes employers have to understand that some people are people that come to work to do a job, and then they go home. They don't necessarily want to do more. And as long as you're not, putting them in a position where they feel forced into doing something, then sometimes we have to be okay with that as employers.
That's a great point. And we have a similar question, but it's kind of on the opposite side of things. So Eve is wondering, in the case of where you have, employees who they'll get their work done, they'll do it, but like referring to your meme with Michael Scott, where you don't get paid enough to care, in cases like when an issue does arise, but they won't go out of their way to make sure it's fixed. How can you bring them into it to make them feel more engaged and make sure when problems do arise that they actually will address the problem and work to solve it?
Well, as the organization, you should at first try to get them engaged, talk to them and find out what's the breakdown. Is it something that they just don't like to do? That's not necessarily meaning that they shouldn't do it. If that's part of their job, then they need to do their job. Um, but you need to understand where that person stands in your organization. It's very important for leaders to understand, is this person wanting to be here for 5 years, 10 years? Is this somewhere they want to retire from? And sometimes if it's something that someone's doing as a side job in a sense to get their main goal up and running, then sometimes you're going to have another real conversation with that person and say, hey, this is the job that we hired you for. And do you have a problem with doing that job? Because you can't allow the entire workforce to suffer because someone didn't, necessarily feel like doing their job, or they don't feel like being engaged because they're not focused on your company. Then you need to have a conversation and find out, is it worth keeping that person that might potentially be bringing your company down?
Okay, great. So it really does kind of go back to just checking in with the employee and seeing like what the root of the problem is that could mean that they're just not engaged or dissatisfied with their work.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, communication can solve a lot of the issues that we feel like we have in the workforce. And sometimes a lot of people are uncomfortable with having those, conversations. Um, and depending on your role, you can't be like, as a person of, HR, I cannot be afraid to have those conversations. I might, you know, be worried about it, or I might have to practice it before I go and talk to someone, but I can't just let it fly by. I need to have that communication to understand where our employees are and what they're wanting from us. Um, so yeah, communication is it's an easy answer, but a lot of the times, unfortunately, it is the answer. And being able to break down the walls of someone who doesn't necessarily want to tell you what's wrong or want to communicate with you is hard, and sometimes it takes multiple conversations. And you can't be everyone's friend at work, but if your employees know that you're willing to do what you can for them, then they'll be more willing to walk through your door or stop you when you're walking, through the hallway, and just start up a conversation. Sometimes you have to go up to someone that wouldn't normally talk to you and just say, "Hey, how are you doing today? Is there anything that I can help you with? Is there anything you need from me?" And sometimes it's you standing there for a little bit to see if they'll open up. Every time they won't, but some days you might get them on a day that something is really bothering them, or something has really excited them about their work, if they've learned something new and want to go deeper into it or whatnot. And it's a good day to have a communication with them.
No, I really like that you clarified that there is more to communication than just saying, yeah, you gotta have some more of it, because it does involve tough conversations and even just having to figure out when's the right time to have it, how to approach it. There's so much that goes into it. So thanks for clarifying that a little bit more.
Mhm.
And I know we're just brushing up on the hour or the half an hour mark, but we have one more question, and this kind of goes back to the previous question, but he is asking, how does being a high performer contrast with being engaged? So could it be that the employee in question is engaged and motivated by being a high performer, or are the two mutually exclusive?
No, you can definitely be engaged by being a high performer, and that's how, from what I've seen in the past, some people are. They want the recognition of, maybe they're the top salesperson, or maybe maybe you have multiple stores in your organization, and they are pushing to be that number one store. And they realize that with being that number one store, that doesn't just mean getting whatever the product is out the door. That means your employees are engaged, your customers know that you're engaged, and they're doing whatever they can to be that high performer to, and then show that they have engagement within the organization.
All right, perfect. Well, I think that that is a great note to end on. And again, I want to say thank you so much, Jazmine, for a wonderful presentation and for answering everyone's questions today. Thank you, everyone, for all your questions and participation in the polls. And thanks again to Achievers for putting on this webinar. And Jazmine, I believe you have something that you wanted to share with the audience as well in your slide deck.
No, no, that was the last one.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you again to everyone, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.